I want to welcome everybody to the Wednesday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. We have a special guest with us. We have Julie Hamill, president of the California Justice Center. It's an amazing thing that Julie does. I've never seen somebody as ferocious going after people in the state of California as Julie Hamill. And I mean that. I'm not just saying that because she's on the show. I saw Julie Hamill one time go after somebody, and it was intense.
I think what you're referring to is when Nathan Hochman went on local news in Los Angeles to endorse Harris for president. I think that's what I was taking issue with at the time.
There you are, but you would not let it go, and I loved watching the conversation. Julie, there's a fascinating thing, and Newsom was on Sean Ryan's podcast, an exceptional podcaster, Sean Ryan, and exceptional what he's done for our country. And I guess Rogan asked him to ask Newsom about COVID and the lockdowns and giving the vaccine to children. And it's really amazing the passes, if you're on the left, you get. And I'm really terrified with what we're watching right now, that somebody like Newsom has the ability to slip by.
To be honest with you, I'm so triggered by everything that comes out of Newsom. But I took the time and I went back through my Twitter feed, because before 2021, I was totally anonymous. Nobody knew who I was. I did not have a Twitter presence. And in February of 2022 is when I sort of started to be public. And I don't know if you know Dr. Human Hamati. He's a great guy. He's a physician in Los Angeles. But he and I and another guy got together and we had a press conference outside of SoFi Stadium because the Super Bowl was coming to town. And they were going to bring 75,000 people into Los Angeles to SoFi Stadium to have the Super Bowl, while my children, who at the time were, I think, 6, 4, and 2, were under a full mask order inside and outside in the county of Los Angeles. And so my kids couldn't go to school and interact with their peers in a normal setting. They were treated like these vectors of disease. They were testing children with swabs outside of school and inside of school. It was treated like this hazmat site, especially in LAUSD. That was horrifying. People were literally in full hazmat suits testing these children. And so we could not wrap our heads around why it was so dangerous that our kids had to be masked indoors and outdoors the entire time when they're participating in school or county activities and sports, but they could have the Super Bowl in Los Angeles and bring 75,000 people in from all over the place, not masked, to enjoy a football game. And so we had this press conference. KTLA was there. I remember the reporter from KTLA showed up with an N95 on outside. And she looked at Dr. Humati and I, and she said, "Are you really trying to contradict what the CDC is saying and recommending?" And I knew at that point we weren't going to be met with any sort of positive reception. Nobody ran a story. Obviously, the Super Bowl went forward, and Gavin Newsom was there with his mask off. What I found most frustrating at that time was my children were really suffering. And children I knew were suffering. Older children in middle school and younger grades in high school were really suffering from isolation, from this bizarre hysteria and the fear around COVID. And then we had these elected officials like Gavin Newsom who didn't care. They were non-responsive. They didn't listen to us. Never once were we given an audience. Never once were we allowed to discuss our concerns. And we were ignored. And then he would go out and flaunt the rules that he was imposing on us. He was found at the French Laundry when everybody was locked down.
The French Laundry is not an actual laundromat. It's a extremely ritzy restaurant.
It is like the nicest, fanciest restaurant in all of California. And at that point in time, I believe that was 2021, we were all under strict lockdowns. It wasn't just outdoor masking orders. It was, you cannot leave your house without a valid legal reason. And he was there with, I believe it was the California Medical Association lobbyist, was sitting next to him at the table. So he's at this fancy dinner with all these fancy lobbyists, who are the only people that he actually listens to, by the way. He does not listen to people like me. He does not care about mothers or children or actual teachers. He cares about what the CTA leader says. He does not care about the actual teachers or the students or the families. I'm sorry, I told you.
No, it's okay. Julie, it's okay. I think people need to hear this from a personal level, because this is
Yeah.
something we've never adjudicated correctly. This is something that has gone over and we've said, forget about what we had to go through. A lot of people that listen to the show don't live in California. They don't understand that we were under curfews. They don't understand that we had to stockpile toilet paper. I mean, Mend has children, right, Mend? And you were going through this. And this was a frightening time to be a parent.
It was horrible. And my oldest at the time was 5 when all of this started, and he was in TK, and we were new to town. And so our entire social connection was really through school. And then when that shut down, we didn't see anybody for months. Like my 5-year-old was completely isolated. He started just sort of like receding into himself and shutting down. And talking to people who had older kids, like their kids were really struggling with isolation, and they were all on screens 12 hours a day, not interacting with people. And so anyway, getting back to Newsom, he never cared. He was always flaunting the rules. He was always getting caught. He would issue a mini apology, but he would never make any meaningful changes whatsoever. He continues that pattern today. He will give lip service. He will talk to these podcasters and pretend to be some kind of moderate person who cares about people, but then he will never walk the walk. He has never once done anything to benefit people like me or my children or anyone in my community.
We're seeing him change the events of the past now. Some of the things he's saying is, fog of war. It was the early days of the pandemic. We didn't know what was going on. And he goes, Florida locked down before California. That might be true. I don't know. I haven't looked that up. But what we do know is that Florida course corrected the fastest. It's not about, the first 2 weeks when nobody knew what was going on. It's when you knew things were going wrong, when you knew you were doing the wrong things, did you double down on that? And California absolutely did. Florida did not. Texas did not. Those places flourished. The kids are doing great. Our kids here, we came from Canada, right? In the beginning of the pandemic, first 2 months, we realized we can't do this. We're American. We're from California. We were 2 months into it. And, they said 2 weeks. We were 2 months and we said, we're out of here. So we came back to California, looked at PV where you live, beautiful area. Actually, first we went to Beverlywood in Beverly Hills. For those, who don't know what Beverlywood is, it's right next door to Beverly Hills. And the area completely changed. There were homeless encampments everywhere. We're like, we can't raise kids here. We're going back to the Hollywood Hills. That's where we wanted to live. That's where we came from. And we couldn't do it. So then we started looking south. I always liked PV. We looked at PV. And then we wound up landing in Huntington Beach, which turned out to be great.
Smart.
Turned out to be great.
Smart.
I like how you say like how you say PV. It sounds like a communicable disease. But I want to bring Golan into the conversation.
Well, absolutely. Look, there's something to be said for the fog of war. Let's say that was an excuse. Let's say we all accepted that. The problem is that when you are doing something and claiming it is a fog of war issue, and then you break your own rules that you have set for everybody else, like you said, what happened with the French Laundry in November. Now, in March 2020, he imposed the strictest shutdowns that existed in the U.S. Just a few months later, he's the one who was breaking his own rules, ignoring all of the lockdowns and everything, this draconian rules that he was applying on everybody else. So the idea of fog of war doesn't apply when you already are breaking your own rules, winking and nudging everybody else saying, but they don't apply to me. Number one. Number two, sure, you can create your own podcast, and that means you can try and create your own narrative, as we've seen so many people do. This is something that he's obviously done. But again, he's saying things, and if you don't know better, the things that he says on the podcast, he brings on Charlie Kirk and he says a bunch of stuff. They sound good. And if you didn't look into it, if you did no research, you might even go, I guess I was wrong. The problem is the internet exists, research is possible, and you can find out that half of what he's stating is not true. I never did this about men and women's sports. I never did this during the lockdowns. Then you go back, a quick DuckDuckGo or Google search, and you're going to find that half of what he's talking about is pure fiction. So the idea that he has now excuses that he is ladling on top of everything is not actually what happened in reality. And ultimately, now, more than ever before, he has laid bare what a liar he is, that he is creating fiction on a regular basis in order to try to shift the message. Because now, as we saw in South Carolina, this guy wants to run for president and now has to appeal to a whole new group of people. And if he doesn't whitewash his history, it ain't going to work.
It's the fundamental difference between a Newsom type character and a Trump type character. Trump consistently says the wrong thing. He says the vulgar thing. He says the thing that rubs the people the wrong way, but he does the right thing. Mm-hmm. Newsom says the right thing, but he does the exact opposite. He sounds so rational. You know, he was saying, Sean Ryan asked him about a 9-year-old old enough to make the decision to have their wiener cut off because they want to, go through some sort of transition. And he goes, well, now that I have an 8-year-old, I really... You don't need to have an 8-year-old to understand that 8-year-olds are not mature enough to make those type of life-altering decisions. But he's such a chameleon. And that's what rubs people the wrong way. It gets them because he says these things that sound right for the most part, but his actions are all the exact opposite, from girls and boys sports, from the lockdowns, and every single issue. Homelessness. He promised to eradicate this state from homelessness 10 or 20 years ago. He has invested billions of dollars in it, given billions of dollars to illegal migrants, and made the state the first sanctuary state for transitions, right? Kids who want to transition. It's a sanctuary. So he does the wrong thing, but he comes out and he sounds so rational. You know, he says the right thing.
Well, with Julie, to that issue, let's transition to your interview on CNN, which was exceptional. I mean, Julie's on Fox News almost every other night with the amazing Trace Gallagher, one of the nicest people in all of the news world. Now, you're on a lot, and you were on CNN, and you owned that CNN reporter. We all saw the footage. I encourage everybody to watch the clip.
I'm really grateful that they allowed me on, and I'm actually shocked that they gave me airtime. They gave me about 5 minutes of time, which is a lot for CNN to give someone like me. And what I wanted to do was I just wanted to get the truth and the facts in front of CNN's audience. And I think ultimately it worked. And so I just had a respectful discussion with Brianna Keilar, just using factual, truthful language and putting reality out in front of people. Because I think the reason why we are where we are on this issue in America is because people have been afraid to speak the truth. They're afraid to be labeled a bigot or a transphobe or be called names or be canceled. Luckily, I already was canceled. You can't cancel me any further. And so I'm free to speak. I'm free to speak the truth. And with respect to that discussion, this is also another Gavin Newsom problem and a perfect example of why he is so absolutely entirely full of shit. He went on Charlie Kirk's podcast and he said it's deeply unfair to allow males to compete in girls' sports. But then he had multiple opportunities to change the law in California. So in California, we have Education Code 221.5F. That is the law that says schools must allow children to use the facilities and play on the teams that align with their gender identity instead of their sex. That is the issue. That is the problem. And that is the law that needs to be changed so that California can be compliant with Title IX and to respect the equal protection rights of girls and women in California. Gavin Newsom is now pretending that he has absolutely no authority. He can't change the law. It was signed by Governor Brown. He has nothing to do with it. It wasn't his idea. It's the legislature. But if you watched the trailer bills for the budget, I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago, Gavin Newsom popped a clause into there and he says, I'm not going to sign this unless the legislature approves this change to CEQA. As the governor, as the leader of the party that holds a supermajority in our legislature in California, he 100% has the power and authority to change laws in California and push policy in the direction that he wants it to go. Otherwise, what good is he? What is he doing? He really has no power. He can't do anything. He's just a figurehead. He's just a podcaster. Anyway, I'm sorry for getting angry.
I actually don't feel that you are getting angry. I think this is exactly what you did when you were on CNN, because you calmly laid it out. That actually, I think, is what made it so effective, is that you basically said, I'm going to bring law and precision and compassion and confidence, but you're going to do it in this very even-keeled way. It was like a disciplined dissection. And that's why I think the thing went viral. because it wasn't, usually it's this, vitriol and rhetoric and people are yelling and the hair's on fire. But you didn't do that. You just, by the way, Brianna was looking flustered while you were doing it and couldn't define this. And we used to define a girl. And she was like, stutter, stutter, stutter. And you just steady as a rock, laid out your case. That's exactly why it worked.
The funniest part about that was that they were talking about a boy who's trans competing in girls' sports, and they were referring to him as a her, and you said, wait, and you said a she, and then it was who said what, who's on first, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it was the trans Abbott and Costello routine that Julie Hamill had going on CNN, which was absolutely brilliant. But I want to move on a little bit and just shift it. Flash forward to the fires, obviously, that he will not get blamed for. Neither will Karen Bass get blamed for. We're not just witnessing the whitewashing of history. We're witnessing the whitewashing of the present, Julie. And this is, 5 months ago that our great city was literally under fire. And they did nothing. And I don't think he'll ever have to pay.
Not only did they do nothing, they haven't rebuilt any of the houses yet.
Yeah.
They promised that they were going to fast track all the permits for the rebuild. None of that has been done. Lies and liars. It's really sad is that Pacific Palisades all voted for these people. I mean, that is a predominantly Democrat neighborhood, wealthy Democrat neighborhood, and they are suffering the consequences unjustly of their actions, of their votes. And I wish people in this state would wake up and vote differently. Vote for competence.
It is. I mean, it's really disturbing. This is something I noticed starting in 2021. People's brains have been hijacked and they are voting for what they perceive to be virtuous and not what is going to benefit their families. What is going to benefit my children? Competent leadership is going to benefit you and your children. Bullshit, the social justice nonsense, radical activism that Karen Bass is pushing is not going to benefit you and your children unless you're an illegal immigrant. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I remember, I got kicked out of everything back in early 2022 because I just couldn't comply anymore with the dumb mandates. I just couldn't do it. I was trying to be nice. But I got kicked out of a basketball league when my son was 5 years old because we were playing outside, playing basketball, a game in 90-degree heat, and they were forcing the 5-year-olds to wear masks. And I said, my son's not going to wear a mask. And the ref said, he's putting my life at risk. He can't play unless you put a mask on him. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And we ended up going back and forth. And I'm looking around and there are 50 parents sitting around on the sidelines. Not one said anything. No one said a word. And their children were struggling to breathe, red-faced, looking up at me with these terrified eyes. And nobody said anything and no one stood up. And so I left with my family. And all of those parents, their instinct to protect their own children was being overridden by this desire to be accepted and included in a tribe and not go outside the lines of what was deemed acceptable or virtuous at the time. Nobody else would say anything. And so that's what's going on with the fires. I have a lot of friends who grew up there and their parents lost their homes. And the people that I know are well aware of the incompetence and they hate Karen Bass and they are just horrified watching what is happening. And they hope that she ends up in prison.
I think to your point, she should end up in prison. But the same thing with Cuomo. He should have been put in prison for his actions during COVID in New York City. I don't think there's any question about that. But go on, how are people looking at us from Barcelona? I love saying that now correctly. Because Golan, just so people know, he went to Barcelona for movie production and ended up staying there with his family and has not left. But how is the world looking at us during that period?
Well, it's interesting because I seem to represent a lot of different groups here in Europe in general. I'm the Jew, I'm the Israeli, I'm the American, I'm kind of whatever anyone needs to bounce ideas off of. So I do get a lot of this stuff. And so just to Julie, give you a little background, my wife, who was at one time, I'm going to be kind and say kind of a wild liberal in her youth, was one of those people who said, if George W. Bush wins the presidency, I'm leaving the United States. And then she did. So unlike Alec Baldwin, actually put her money where her mouth was and left. And then little by little over time, especially having been with me and seeing how the press lied about stuff, how they left out information, how they twist stuff, how they try to whitewash the past, she has come around to the fact that, oh my God, I've been lied to for a very long time. And who knows what else I've been lied to about. And one topic at a time, until she finally was like, you know what, I'm going to be a mom. Now I realize it. I don't need my kids to go to college anymore, and I'm not going to read the paper. Your turn, go on, go do what you got to do. So that's the background. We ended up here, and look, I love LA. I lived there for a very long time. I loved living in LA. I did not like the way things run, from the homeless encampments to the brush that wasn't cleared away that eventually led to fire, et cetera, et cetera. But how are we looked at here? America as a whole, every time Trump is in office, in fact, I will even go so far as to say every time a Republican is in the White House, there is something that is just put into the water, not just here, but in a lot of places because of the skew of the media and how they portray everything, that everyone assumes that it's the worst thing that's ever happened to the world. They say to me all the time, oh, Trump, huh? And they kind of expect me to be like, can you believe it? CNN International is bad enough. And they do a tremendous job of making sure that America looks bad when a Republican is in the White House. But so does The Guardian. So does The Times. So does Sky News. So do all of these places. It's like there's something inbred within all of them. Like we've talked about before, there's that moment, Julie, you'll appreciate this, being someone who goes on these networks. You know that thing where on Monday, no one's ever heard a word. And then on Tuesday, every single talking head suddenly says the word cis, which you've never heard before. And you're like, did I miss the memo? But they actually have groups that let them all know this is the new mandate. This is the new word. This is the new phrase.
Yep.
Same thing's happening internationally. And so almost every day they go, oh, can you believe tariffs? And I'm like, you didn't know the word tariffs 3 hours ago. And now all of you want to talk to me about tariffs. And it happens every single subject that's going on, whether it's Iran or Israel or Epstein or whatever thing they're looking to enrage people about in order to make Trump, the Republicans, America look bad on the world stage. So that's the answer to that question. It's exhausting.
Julie, obviously you were never invited back into the groups, but why would you want to be back in groups that don't want you in the first place? So you have found these different groups and you're fighting this fight. How is the fight coming along?
It's actually really interesting. I have been invited back into the groups because the window of acceptable conduct has shifted. Now, when people look at what I did during that basketball game, which might have been deemed totally insane at the time, now people look back and think, oh, maybe making 5-year-olds play basketball outside in 90-degree weather when they're actively running and can't breathe was a bad idea. What I think is really interesting is I was kicked out of a social group a couple of years ago for having a discussion about school district policy that hid information from parents about transitioning kids. And I spoke very frankly and honestly about it, and I was excoriated by a group of women who were very upset with me that I dared want to force the government to share with a child's parents very vital, critical information about that child. How dare I want to do that? And how dare I put that kid's life at risk? Just total mental nonsense. I was kicked off of all of the social rosters. I was no longer invited to parties. I wasn't spoken to by a number of women for a long time. And something has happened over the last 6 months where we're not actively talking about that conversation or those issues, but I'm welcomed back into all of these groups. And I think there's just a cultural awakening to certain issues. I think we're moving back towards sanity. At least I hope that's what we're doing.
By the way, I think you're nailing it, because what I see a lot of is people being welcomed back in, but like with amnesia. Anyone who dared to question the mandates trademark are pretending it never happened. So you suddenly get the phone call, but it's like a retraction in the New York Times. It's back on page 75. Like, we're not really going to talk about the fact that we got it wrong. You were right, but we won't ever say that.
We're seeing some of the symptoms get swept under the rug. You're seeing some of these corporations roll back their DEI policies, but this disease is definitely not crushed. It has gone slightly into remission. It's gone slightly below the radar. They're changing the language on their websites, but they're not actually changing their hiring policies. So this is a fight that needs to be completely eradicated. It's a cancer that needs to be absolutely removed. Although it feels like things are going in the right direction, we have a long way to go.
I agree with you 100%. I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that's an exceptional point. Julie, you're a lot nicer than Judah Friedman. I would not go back to those groups and forget about the dating apps that have banned me for life. While I don't even have the chance of getting back in. But I am not as forgiving as to the people that did what they did. I think it's really important to keep fighting and reminding people of what we went through. People were hoarding toilet paper.
Forget the toilet paper. They did passports. They had vaccine passports to get into restaurants. Jimmy Kimmel was out there saying, if you come to the hospital with a heart attack and you're vaccinated, come on in. And if you aren't vaccinated, sorry, Wheezy, and you die on the door to the hospital. Those were his words. That's where we're coming from. So people need to be held accountable, not because it's revenge, although that is super sweet, but in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That's why it's going to be so sweet exposing Newsom as he runs for the 2028 nominee.
Final thoughts on this, Julie?
Yes, thank you. Gavin Newsom, his MO is, as I mentioned earlier, is he will try to disclaim responsibility for all of the bad things. All the bad things were the local government's fault, he says, about COVID. But Gavin Newsom kept a state of emergency in place for 3 years. That state of emergency could have been lifted at any time with a proclamation from the governor. Without that state of emergency, we would not have had Barbara Ferrer in LA County locking people in their homes, masking 2-year-olds for 8 hours a day, and doing all of the other crazy nonsense that she did. Newsom knew he was wrong. He was sued multiple times. James Gallagher, Kevin Kiley sued him. I tried to sue at one point. Do not allow this man to disclaim responsibility for what happened to kids and adults in California for 4 years. He tortured us, and he knew it.
Amanda, I want to go, though, to Julie's point is we discussed the other day about we're never against people not having a platform. We're against people platforming those people.
Right.
And when Charlie Kirk or any conservative goes on Gavin Newsom's shows, they're platforming him. And I think this is incredibly scary that they're doing it. It's dangerous. Let him sit alone in isolation. We don't have to recognize him because everything out of his mouth meant is a lie.
Well, I think if you're going to go onto Newsom's show or you're going to have Newsom on your show, it's your responsibility to hold him to task. Call him out for the things he did. Do not let him weasel out. If you let him on your show and then you let him weasel out with these made up excuses that he's doing now, which are factually incorrect, like you could pull up the quotes, the things that he said back then and play it for him, and it's the opposite of what he's saying now. So if this guy does go on, it's important that you hold him to task. The other thing is that this is not just about masks. Some people might be listening and saying, what's the big deal? A kid had to wear a mask. It's not the end of the world, blah, blah, blah. He forced children to get vaccinated. He forced healthy young adults to get vaccinated. With a trial vaccination, there was never any risk to children. There was never any prevention of spreading it by vaccinating children. That was the other thing, is that the teachers unions kept on saying, oh, the kids have to get vaccinated because we don't want the teachers dying. There was no evidence, zero, that it stopped the spread. That was completely made up, which brings us back to leadership. Any leader you hire can get it wrong, but it's the competent ones that change course. They course correct quickly. It's the incompetent ones, like California, every single elected leader here got it wrong and did not course correct. And that's where the pain really comes out. You know, Florida did a lot better. Their kids are thriving. California did not. So that's where it shows.
Well said. Go on, final thoughts on this.
Look, I think there's two things here. I think that the key element of what Men is talking about is the same thing I tell my kids. Julie, I know you've got kids there. I've got a 3-year-old and I've got a 9-year-old. And I always tell them the same thing. Making mistakes is human. This is what we do. To err is human. That is not the issue. If there is a situation where the fog of war actually applies, I am a military guy. I was in the Army, and I know that that is a real thing. It's what you do once you realize what the truth is, once you reveal things, once you discover things. It's the course correct that actually reveals who you really are on the inside. So I think what Mend is talking about is absolutely true. I know it's a cliche at this point to reference it, but this American Psycho, and not just his look, which is also American Psycho, but also
You're stealing my line. That's me.
I believe that's many people, because you can't look at the guy and not see Christian Bale with his hair slicked back.
I see the Joker.
But it's all of the above. I'm a screenwriter. So all of those characters, they're not the antagonist. They are the chaos agent. And that's what we see here, is we see him doing things, lying about it here, saying one thing to Charlie Kirk, saying another thing to the people, doing another thing, pretending he can't affect it, signing things in the law. Just chaos. There's no consistency to it, except it's almost like a deliberate thing that he is trying to break this place. And so that's number one. Number two, if you are going to have people go on a podcast, or you are going to have people interview, I don't have a problem with that, actually, but it better be because you're there to reveal truth. If you recall, a while back, Tim Pool was brought on by Joe Rogan to interview Jack Dorsey. You remember this? And the policy chief for Twitter at the time. And why did he bring in Tim Pool? Because he wanted this to be a real thing. Rogan had been accused of soft shoeing the last time Dorsey had been on. He said, I want someone who actually is going to be able to go hard here. So am I going to fault Tim Pool for coming on Rogan's podcast and platforming Jack Dorsey? No, because he was there to hold his feet to the fire, to Mend's point. I think if you do that, if Charlie Kirk goes on Newsom's podcast or vice versa, and he's there to reveal truths that we didn't have prior, absolutely great. If you are Tucker Carlson interviewing the president of Iran and you're just lobbing soft questions that are pre-written, that is not okay. And I think that that has to be differentiated.
But that's the major issue we're seeing, though, is that whenever these people go on these long form podcasts, they cozy up. There's no way around it. You can't be in a room with somebody for 2 hours.
Unless you're Douglas Murray and you're on
Douglas Murray. Douglas Murray being the only one when he went on Rogan, and he will never be invited back on to most mainstream podcasts because he actually confronted Rogan. I want to move on because there's a really serious situation going on right now in Syria where Druze are being, I didn't say Jews with a J, Druze with a D. I think people get confused. They are being slaughtered, men. Slaughtered. Obviously, nobody's speaking up. Raped, mutilated, slaughtered. And the only people coming to their defense right now is Israel. And this is what Israel does. Druze are in that region, just so people understand, are the closest thing you could align with a Christian. The fact that there's dead silence on this is extremely telling, man.
The Druze are, again, it's Druze with a D. The Druze are an offshoot of Islam. Their people live both in Israel and in Syria and in Lebanon. Right now in Syria, you have jihadis that have taken over the country. That's essentially the root of the problem, is that this guy, Mohammed Julani, the president of Syria, the guy who took over, he brought in a lot of fighters. And these guys are Uyghurs. They are Chechens. A lot of them are former ISIS guys that broke off. They formed their own. They used to be ISIS. Now they're not. And they're doing the Newsom thing. When he gets up and talks to foreign leaders, this Jolani guy, he says all the right things. We're forming a government of inclusivity, says all the right things. But then his fighters roll into these towns and they slaughtered the Druze. What's interesting with that is that the Druze are in the south of the country. So they're close to the border with Israel and Lebanon. Up in the north, you have another group of minority Kurds, and the Kurds are watching what's happening to the Druze. And they're saying, oh my God, we are next. If they come up this way, they're going to do that to us. So there's lots of videos on the nicer part. They shave their mustaches because the Druze all grow mustache and they think it's a way of humiliating them. And then in the most extreme forms, you're seeing them chop off all their heads. So there's, I think, 200 or 300 Druze that were slaughtered over the past couple of days. The military of Syria started rolling in heavy artillery like tanks and larger weapons, which violates Israel's red line. They're saying You're not allowed to bring heavy weapons into the south of the country. We're just keeping that out. So Israel took that out. But, these fighters on pickup trucks are still showing up in villages and they're just slaughtering people. People are hiding in their homes and they come up to them. The fighters are not Syrian, so they don't know who's who. So they come up and they say, "Are you Druze?" And if they say yes, then that's it. They either get killed or they get severely beaten. It's really terrible what's happening. The UN is not saying anything. None of these other countries are doing anything. They all think that they could work with this guy. The question is, can he actually hold his country together? I don't think he can.
No, not a shot. No. But I want to move on though to Julie on this one because Julie, this idea oftentimes of America first doesn't mean we don't care about atrocities that are going on around the world. I also find it conveniently interesting that nobody ever cares about these atrocities. 200 people in a church somewhere get killed and nobody opens up their mouth, Julie. And it's always the Jews. It's heartbreaking to watch this type of stuff. And yes, we can help.
I think what I have watched since October 7th, since that time in 2023, I've been serving on a school board and I've been going on Fox pretty regularly. And so I've been tracking certain information that I find really disturbing and alarming. And one of the most disturbing things that I'm watching in our country right now is this very organized propaganda effort against Israel. It is a stronghold on college campuses and high schools all over the country. It's not just PV, it's not just certain neighborhoods. We had this issue with an anti-Semitic yearbook article in Palos Verdes last spring, so spring of 2024. And when that happened, I was tracking in the media, that same thing was happening all over the country. It was not just this random one-off. That one child just decided to write this really horrendous op-ed. She used the words, quote, "the Jewish problem." And that was published in our yearbook. That was not just an isolated incident. It was part of a coordinated, well-funded propaganda effort in our own country that I personally believe is being funded by foreign interests who have invested in the American education system and essentially hijacked it. And so when you're saying no one is talking about the Druze or no one is talking about all of these other atrocities that are constantly going on in the world, that is because there's no funded, coordinated propaganda effort in support of them in the country. Perhaps someone in our local high school would like to start a movement to support the Druze in Syria. It would be very hard for them to get going because there's not some sort of network for them to lock into and connect with other groups. Students for Justice for the Druze, for example, doesn't exist to my knowledge. Yet, if you wanted to get involved with Students for Justice for Palestine, you can lock into a network that is funded by foreign organizations and is extremely active in American education institutions.
You're spot on. You're spot on.
And just so you know, just to your point, because a lot of things are thrown around sometimes, we know that China is sponsoring the Jews for Mamdani in New York City. We know
China?
this Chinese woman is a heavy donor.
There's a billionaire who is a communist and he migrated to China. His niece is the one running this. He's anti-capitalist. I don't know if they're actually indigenous Chinese. And why are they doing it? Because they're just, for the Chinese, it's just sowing dissent. The Chinese want us chasing our tails. They don't care who wins, who's right. They don't care about any of the sides. They just want us distracted and infighting.
Chaos.
Just to be clear for our audience, it's important. The guy who is financing that stuff is originally from Sri Lanka and lives in Shanghai, China. And this is the billionaire that is apparently financing, like you said, the Jews for Mamdani movement, which of course is never being spoken about. Even the people who began these organizations, just like JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, which I have an episode of my other podcast, The Jew Can't Handle the Truth, that is called JVP, Not Jewish, Not Our Voice, and Not for Peace. And it's shocking when you dig into it, how not Jewish the organization is. This is the same thing all over again. These are people trying to destabilize the West, trying to break down society. But I don't want to lose the conversation we were having a moment ago about the Druze. I think it's incredibly important to point this out. So I was in the army, the Israeli army, And one of my commanding officers was a Druze soldier, a guy named Abdallah, one of the greatest people I've ever met in my entire life. There are about 150,000 Druze citizens that are in the IDF, in the police, in the government in Israel. They are brothers and sisters with the Jews and the Israelis in general. The reason why Israel is doing what it's doing right now is because they are protecting their own. And when, to your point, Julie, when I look at how the media is covering this story or not covering the story, CNN finally on the lower third of the page put up something about this. The article, it starts off giving a little bit of information and then pivots into Israel attacking Syria, and how Trump is asking Israel to stop attacking Syria, and Israel escalated in Syria. And it becomes this article about, wait a minute, what happened to the Druze? Weren't they all beheaded 5 seconds ago? Now Israel's the bad guy once again. Instead of it being presented as Israel is going in and helping non-Jewish, non-Israelis who are connected to their own citizens. They are essentially being superheroes right now, doing something that no one else is willing to do. As men pointed out, EU is silent, UN is silent, everyone's doing lip service here and there, but there's only one country that is stepping up to do this. And everyone is not only ignoring it, they are actively rewriting the story to make it seem like Israel is in the wrong somehow.
Well, because they always are. I think that's the narrative that's fully become the story, what we're witnessing right now. I want to move on, though, because when it comes to Trump, everybody has brought up this one thing. It's a mass hysteria we've never witnessed in our lifetimes, from his first term to now. And we're witnessing a mass hysteria, not just with the left, we're witnessing a mass hysteria with the right. And with many people in the right. Obviously, I'm referring to the E-Files. We don't like to get into it on this show, but Julie, you're a lawyer. And so I think it's extremely important that we talk about this, having a lawyer on. Dershowitz has come out and said there's no list. His lawyer says there's no list. Epstein's lawyer. I get that. We all agree that the Trump administration botched this in every which way known to man, from first giving out those stupid binders to the stupid influencers.
You're talking about PR perspective.
From a PR perspective, I've never seen something handled as badly as this could be handled. No offense to the person we know that's an influencer that got one of the binders, but also to Pam Bondi's release of the memo. As a lawyer who has seen a lot of lists, a lot of briefs, is there anything that you see there from your perspective?
You know, I haven't done deep dives on it, but I've looked at it and I listened to Dershowitz. I love Alan Dershowitz. I think he is a really fascinating person, and I have no reason to doubt him. And I was watching someone put together a social media sort of reel showing an old interview he did versus a new one, trying to look like it was like a gotcha. But he didn't change what he said. And you have to pay attention to the specific words that are used. There's no client list. There's not a list of clients, but there's information. And there's information that's currently under seal in court. And lawyers can go in and move to unseal certain records and probably glean more information from that. That's sort of my broad takeaway. I'm not familiar enough with what happened with regard to the binders, but when I saw that come out that day, I felt secondhand embarrassment for the administration and the influencers. I certainly wouldn't have done that. Everything about Epstein, everything surrounding Epstein has taken on a life of its own. It's like, use your imagination to come up with whatever you think happened. I remember I did some commentary on Fox one night about a year ago when some new information came out. There were names that were released in the context of names mentioned in a deposition. And everybody who was reading all the documents were saying, oh my God, everybody who was named here went to the island and they all had sex with children and blah, 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 blah. And so I did a deep dive and I looked at, what are these documents? Where did these names actually come from? They were literally, the lawyer for one of the defendants, I think, was asking one of the women, have you ever heard of Leonardo DiCaprio? Have you ever heard of so-and-so? And so just that question, just a lawyer asking that question and naming a name, added his name to this list that's associated with Epstein just because a lawyer asked a question. And so I made a point when I went on the show to say, anyone who is named in this certain release is not accused of wrongdoing. You have to be very careful when you're talking about a serious situation involving child sex crimes. you don't want to falsely accuse people of being involved or doing some sort of criminal behavior simply because a lawyer might have mentioned them in a question to a witness.
I love that take because I agree with you 100%. This is really where the rub is. I know we've had our own disagreements on this between men that go on and myself, but the one thing we all agree on is how badly this has all been handled. But Golan, I want to go to you quickly on this one because Trump came out today and he pretty much said, screw everybody. And the more you challenge Trump, Golan, the more he's apt to say, screw you. So when he sees people like Mike Flynn, who he pardoned, he looks at that as an act of betrayal. I think this all started with Iran when all the podcaster movement went against him and did not support him with the bombing and all said World War III was going to happen. And we're witnessing that now. So, Golan, your quick take on that, because you know how much I love talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
And look, bottom line is, I actually don't think it started with Iran. I think this has been a series of purity tests, and one after the other, it's you either agree, and it's just like what was going on with the left, by the way. You either agree with this particular doctrine, or you are going to be banished to the cornfield, to use a Rod Serling reference. And so this is just yet another version of this, because the Epstein client list, it's not a scandal. It's not even a conversation. It's now a religion, like any of these other things that we have to just blindly believe. Now, I don't know if there is one. I haven't seen the files myself, but like any religion that goes rogue, it's got its own heresy trial. If at this point, if you say, I agree with the DOJ, and I believe there is no list, immediately everyone then goes, oh, that person's probably on the list, right? Dershowitz said what he said, and I saw 1,000 people online go, that's because he's on the list.
Well, Dershowitz said that there is information, and he said it's being sealed by a judge or
That's
two
right.
judges.
But he also said there is no client list. He said there is information, as Julie pointed out.
Information. Yeah.
And immediately online, that phrasing alone was enough because people don't look at nuance, Julie. So yes, you have to look at the details. There's no details when you're talking about how quickly can I get to X to write a post. And so everyone started writing about how he's on a list. And the same thing happened when Trump mentions it. By the way, there is, because of certain witnesses, let's call that quote unquote credible evidence. Okay, there are certain people. Prince Andrew, for instance, is mentioned specifically in witness testimony.
And was accused by the victim.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Her testimony
Virginia Guffrey.
to specific.
Yeah, too free.
Donald Trump exists in no witness testimony. There is no documentation. That's just something that somebody threw in because there are some photos out there, like there are photos of Epstein with a zillion other people, but this one was politically expedient, so they used it. It's the same thing. It's just hair on fire purity tests. They're witch hunts with better fonts. And that is exactly where we are right now. This is just the latest one. And believe me, when this one is finished, hopefully soon, there will be another one. And there will be another one after that.
That is exactly what Trump realizes about this, is that there's always going to be another mass hysteria case. Man, I want your final thoughts on this because there's one more topic I want to touch on, which has to do with California.
I've been waiting. All right. So the way I see it, there's two possible scenarios. One possible scenario is that Epstein Island was an island where a lot of elites went and they raped kids. Possible. Another scenario is that Epstein Island was an island where Epstein himself did that and nobody else did it. Right? We don't know. That's the information we don't know. What's suspicious is how did that guy get that much money? How did he amass that much wealth without a blackmail scheme? And his blackmail scheme seems to be this thing that we're talking about. But it's worth noting that this morning Trump came out and he said that Pam Bondi should release whatever she thinks is credible. So that is the answer. I get it that you guys are saying that this is a revolt against the president. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is that there is a way to handle this. And what you do is you say, we're going to expose the people. If anyone was involved, we're going to expose it and we're going to bring them to justice. That's what you do. That's how you deal with this.
To be clear, I didn't say it was a revolt against the president. I want to put that on the record.
Okay.
I want the lawyer's final thoughts on this, because when he puts it on the lawyer, which is Pam Bondi, what is she allowed to release? Because, Julie, you brought up something very important. People don't know how to differentiate. They see a name, they make the assumption. So what is she allowed to release? She obviously is not allowed to release 10,000 hours worth of child rape. Julie, so what is she allowed to release as Trump says that to her?
I don't know specifically what the rules are with respect to Department of Justice ability to release like investigation files, but I assume they're similar to the rules in California where the investigatory files and investigations for an active litigation matter are not public record. I don't know if things are classified. I really don't have enough information to opine on that, but I do know that if there are documents in a case somewhere, if that's in Florida or New York or wherever it is, and there are documents under seal in that case, those could be unsealed upon a motion by anyone. Anyone can go into court and make a First Amendment argument to say, we want these records unsealed because they benefit the public more than keeping them private benefits whoever is benefiting from that.
So you're referring to FOIA, right? Or the Freedom of Information Act, right?
No. It's not a FOIA request to court. Anybody can go in to the court and make a motion to unseal a court file. It's not, I don't think that's a FOIA action. It's just a
Okay.
motion pursuant to the First Amendment.
That would be amazing. But listen, I want to end this with we'll get the real story on Tucker's show on Thursday night as he has America's historian on, Daryl Cooper, the lover of all things Israel and Judaism and the foremost historian on Britain during World War II and the Holocaust.
As if we didn't know where Tucker stands right now, he also put out a tweet as part of the advertising of that episode, calling him the most honest historian.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if Julie is aware of who this is. But anyways, I want to move on to the last topic, Julie, which is California, which is we really pick them well. We really pick them well. And by the way, just for the record, I only learned this. Julie's not Jewish. So everybody in the group that's listening to the show, we open up to everybody. And I learned that when I wished Julie a Shabbat Shalom, and she said, "I'm not Jewish." And I said, and I think I responded, "Nobody's perfect." But Julie, the DOJ today is going forward with prosecuting Adam Schiff for mortgage fraud. The fact that Adam Schiff lied for 4 to 8 years about Donald Trump, saying he did every single thing that he could not prove, but because he sits in the House, you can't sue him.
I have to be very careful about what I say because when I was suing LA County, and stop me if you've heard this story before, but I subpoenaed Twitter. I subpoenaed what is now X because we found out, or we suspected, and we were right, that the county was censoring us. This alliance of LA County parents, people who were opposed to the mandates being issued by the county. And as a result of that subpoena, we received all of these communications between Adam Schiff's chief of staff and the communications director for the LA County Department of Public Health. And Schiff's chief of staff was helping the LA County comms director access the highest levels of Twitter. So the head of US public policy for Twitter to censor dissent on the mandates in LA County. Schiff had that access because Schiff was the head of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And in that role, he had unilateral authority to issue subpoenas and initiate investigations, which is a lot of power and a lot of authority. And what ended up happening in my case was the lawyers for X worked together with the lawyers for the county, and they sealed all of those records that I got from the subpoena. So I haven't been able to show anyone what's in those records.
That's extremely fascinating. I'm loving this more and more that we're having you on the show. Like this is like fascinating stuff. Men, final thoughts on this?
I want to ask Julie where she thinks we're headed because we recently had an election for mayor of LA and the Democratic Party pulled all the stops. They brought everybody out to campaign for Karen Bass against Rick Caruso. And Rick Caruso himself is not the greatest. I mean, that guy came out and made some ridiculous statements after the fires and a whole bunch of stuff. But he would have been a lot more competent than Karen Bass.
Yes.
So where do you think we're going in California?
We need voter ID, number one. It's so important to have some election integrity. We need to clean the voter rolls, and we need to have voter ID. That's number one. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on.
If you didn't believe otherwise, Julie, I think you were crazy.
Thank you.
Anybody that wouldn't think we have 2 million people that aren't on the voter rolls, and as Mendes often brought up, it's illegal to show ID. That's how
Right.
That's
crazy.
Newsom. Newsom did that.
Right. That's how crazy we are, Julie. So where do we go from here?
I think they're doing that. I think Trump is forcing them to do voter ID if they want to get federal funds. Am I correct on that?
He has an executive order regarding voter ID. I don't know enough to speak intelligently about it right now. I do know that Huntington Beach has its own voter ID requirement, and I believe they're currently prevailing in their legal battle. They're the only jurisdiction in California that is actually trying to counter Newsom and his crazy nonsense.
The city attorney is my neighbor. Great guy.
Oh, Gates or Vigliotti? Which one?
Vigliotti.
Okay. So in terms of where we're going with politics in Los Angeles, right now it is completely captured by the DSA. I'm not exaggerating. We have multiple.
What's the DSA?
The Democratic Socialists of America. They hold 2, maybe 3 seats on the city council. The People's Council is this radical, lunatic, socialist faction who is running the show. They're making policy in Los Angeles, and Karen Bass is their leader. She does not represent people like me or people like you. She represents this socialist, communist, radical agenda that she is implementing in LA, and it's to the detriment of everyone who works hard, is productive, and is paying taxes.
This is the same group that AOC is a part of, the same group that
Yes.
Mamdani is a part of, same group that praised the murderer of 2 Israeli diplomats and said that the murderer should go free. A psychotic group of people.
Yes.
And Golan, the reason I'm bringing this up today, I'm so glad Julie's been on the show, is because there's a lot of other news out there that people aren't reporting on or talking about. Everybody could talk about the auto pen, which we did yesterday. There's so many things people could talk about, but hiding the past and what we've been through as a country and as we've been through as a state here is really criminal. And what we're witnessing is it's contagious. So you have Mayor, this guy from New York, Mamdani. Then you have move on to Minnesota. You have obviously California with Karen Bass. This is coming to everybody's local neighborhood. Don't kid yourself. You're not safe. The second you think you're safe, just because you might live in Mississippi, trust me, it metastasizes. And before you know it, it's in your neighborhood. Go on.
And they're putting it in such terms that these are essentially pilot programs, and they are cowing everybody from being able to dissent. There was an interview recently where they were asking someone, would you want to live under Sharia law? I don't remember where I watched it, but it was a shocking thing to see this person stutter their way, a woman, by the way, stutter their way through, well, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, and maybe the burqa is just, and one stutter after another, trying to talk her way out of not saying Sharia law sounds insane. She didn't want to say that because she didn't want to be canceled, because she didn't want to be labeled a racist, and that's what they're doing to everybody. If you are going to push back against some of these ideologies, whether it's socialism, whether it's communism, whether it's Islamism, any of these things, they are putting you in a position where now, again, purity test, I keep coming back to this because everybody is now suffering under this ideology of I have to be careful what I say, even if it's the truth. I have to tell my lying eyes to shut up. And part of that is what we're seeing through lawfare, where every time something is happening, at least until the Supreme Court did what they did recently, the lower courts were pushing back on it and saying, nope, that's not valid. Or whether it was in your communities where the people just looked at you and said, if you do that, we're going to excommunicate you. Over and over again, we're seeing these things quashed. I bring that up, by the way, because the thing you were talking about a moment ago, Mend, Trump's order that we do want to require U.S. ID in order to get federal funds was quashed, of course, by a lower court and is now on hold. So no, that's not actually active right now, because before the Supreme Court made their ruling, they made sure they took care of that, like they took care of 50 other things that Trump was trying to implement. But so the whole thing now is that we are afraid to speak up against what is clearly going to be crushing to us. And those that do, like the Epstein thing, well, you must be on the list. And if you're not, we'll put you on the list. And now everyone is cowed into silence. And so nobody is fighting back anymore, except for a small cadre of people. And most of them are on this podcast right now.
I raised my hand. I raised my hand. And again, my issue has always been, I will say this again, I've hated, Julie, the messaging from this White House from day one, not just about Epstein, but a lot of other things. I often say men should be the 1 minute message from the White House because he does it so concisely. And this is my biggest fear. They're doing so much good. This White House is doing so much good. And we know a lot of people that are writing the laws, Julie, about the anti-Semitism on campuses, with the trans stuff, with so many things that he ran on that he is actually accomplishing. I mean, think about it, that Harvard could lose accreditation because of their acts. That's what Trump is trying to do. He's going after the head of the snake. And that is the head of the snake in our country of indoctrination, is these college campuses, Julie. And your final thoughts on that and what your organization does.
What I think is going on is this widespread indoctrination and propaganda that is being force fed to our children and to the adults in our country at such a rate that it's really hard to counter it with facts and truth. Like, I'm trying to do that. I try to do something from the Justice Center called Primary Source. I try to do it at least once, maybe twice a month, where I'm just giving people the facts. Like, look at the primary sources, look at the actual documents. What does the case actually say versus how is ACLU interpreting this case? Like, the stuff that's in the media is radical and crazy and very rarely accurate. And I think some of the things that Trump is doing are trying to just save America from a basic level, where stopping the indoctrination and stopping the propaganda in our educational institutions is probably the most fundamentally important thing that we can be doing. I think fundamentally what we have to do in America is end the indoctrination, end the propaganda, and give people actual truthful information so that we can save our country from going off this radical, crazy socialist cliff. It sounds a little dramatic, but I see this stuff as a school board member, and I'm looking at what we're teaching our children, and it's unsustainable. Like, we're teaching children to hate America and to hate the values that this country was built on and individual liberty. And if you teach a couple of generations this message and then you set them free and they start running our institutions, we're done. Like, this country no longer exists.
Isn't it interesting that so much Qatari money has been poured into all of these places, and suddenly all the messages are how to dismantle our country because we're bad? Isn't that weird, or is that absolutely in line with their ideology?
It's absolutely in line with their ideology. And I hope that people realize that. And I think that some of the things Trump is doing right now are aimed at dismantling that. That is why we're cutting funding. That is why we are enforcing civil rights laws and making sure we're not indoctrinating children into this anti-America ideology.
Yeah, a lot of this sounds a lot like what I think his name was Yuri Bezmenov. There was a former KGB agent who talked about the 20-year, 40-year plan for psychological subversion, where he goes, first we get the soft-minded, woke, liberal types. We convince them that socialism and social justice and all these things are the most important. Then they become professors, they become the teachers, then they indoctrinate the new youth. The youth grows up, they're now running the country, and you're infected, you can't get them out. So these policies, these ideas, they've been working on that for the last 40 years. Most of America is just waking up to it now, going, why do we have a socialist running for the mayor of New York? Like, what is happening? And they don't even understand that there's been a war waged against them for the last 40 years. And you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, but it's much larger. I am all for school voucher program. I think that would help it because there's no checks and balances for the schools out there. So they are just teaching whatever they want and there's no repercussion. In fact, when their scores drop, they get more money. So they are incentivized to do a terrible job. There's so much wrong with that.
For our audience's sake, I just want to make sure they know what Mend is talking about, because this is one of those things that nobody mentions and you absolutely need to be aware of. You're talking about Yuri Bezmenov, right? This former KGB agent who gave a bunch of interviews and revealed how the KGB basically, or how communist regimes in general, subvert and control democracies and democratic countries without firing a shot. You're seeing it happen right now. There are 3 stages or 4 stages to this. But the first stage is, as Mend pointed out, was demoralization. That is a 15 to 20 year stage. That is basically the ideological subversion stage of this. And it takes a very long time normalizing chaos, rewriting history, destroying trust in institutions. This is something that is in the playbook. You can look outside your window and see it happening currently. But that's the 20-year one. The next one is 2 to 5 years. That's destabilization. And the one after that, you're in crisis mode. That's when things are on fire. That's 6 weeks. Because once you've broken down all the major institutions, then it goes much faster. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. The last stage is normalization, and that is almost instantaneous. So it's really important for us to pull the brakes now while we are still in the first stage, even though, unfortunately, we're kind of further into the demoralization stage than we should be.
I want to thank you for that. I think that was an incredible explanation of what Mend brought up and what Julie has been talking about. Right now, you see, we are in crisis mode. It's I don't know how you put out fires. I really don't. I think we're again with Trump at another inflection point. Thank God he knows how to play the game a little bit better than most. That's the thing we could pray for. It's important that I get this out. Golan, everybody, a lot of us were affected after October 7th, obviously, in different ways. I met Julie at a dinner for the Impact Forum, which is an amazing organization that donates to nonprofits in Israel that are trying to do good, that are trying to do great things, that are trying to do scientific breakthroughs, every breakthrough. And I met you there, and I guess that's why I thought you were Jewish in the first place. And a lot of us have become citizen activists. So while we do this podcast, and Julie goes on Fox and CNN, and Mend has American Exceptionalism, October 7th was a big impetus. For me, I've been doing this for quite a while. I've been out of the closet politically. It would be a lot easier if I came out of it. Just so you know, I did ask a friend of mine. This is a true story. His name was Anthony. And 20 years ago, I said to him in Hollywood, he was a conservative. And I said, is it easier for you to say you're gay to people or that you're a conservative coming out of the closet? And he said, oh, gay. He goes, because with gay, I only had to come out of the closet once. And I love that answer because he's constantly always having to come out of the closet as a conservative. But everybody here has been trying to help and do their service. So everybody out there, keep your eye on the prize. There's a lot we could be doing with your local leadership, national leadership. And as Julie pointed out, you could go to court and say, I want to file and demand that you get a file. So everybody could be doing this. This is like the citizen army. And that's what our country was really set up for and what it was made for, that we're each able to do this. So, Julie, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. How do people get in touch with you? How do people donate to you?
Thank you. Before I get there, I just wanted to share a suggestion because maybe one of you can make this happen. I think Joe Rogan should invite Gavin Newsom onto his show, but he should have Adam Carolla do the interview. So I think Adam Carolla interviewing great. Gavin Newsom on Joe Rogan's show would be perfect.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Agreed.
That would be great. So it's justiceca.com, California Justice Center. My email address is julie@justiceca.com. My Twitter handle is @Hamill_law. Pretty active there. And my work is supported by the California Policy Center. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. You will be back. I will say that already. I'm already asking for our second date. I don't play around. It's very rare I get second dates anyways. I want to thank Mend Stern for not complimenting me on my haircut.
Nice haircut. Nice haircut.
Thank you. Detective Golan caught it yesterday, too. And you could find him also. His amazing thing is American Exceptionalism. And I really do have to give props to Golan because, Julie, I'm not sure. I brought this up before, but Golan has dedicated the last 3 years of his life to advocacy. He hasn't gotten paid. He doesn't get paid for it. I know his wife wants to beat him up sometimes for it. And this is a guy that was an executive at Marvel. I mean, he's one of the biggest players in the film industry and that decided to give up a lot to fight, not just for Israel, but to fight for freedoms. And I don't bring that up often enough, but Golan, you are a hero.
Thank you.
And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You can find them on True Social. I want to thank everybody and remind everybody and thank everybody again for getting us so high in the rankings on Apple Podcasts. You could find us on Apple Podcasts at The Daily Cheat Sheet, Spotify at The Daily Cheat Sheet, Substack at The Daily Cheat Sheet, YouTube at The Daily Cheat Sheet, X at TD Cheat Sheet. And of course, you can find us on Instagram at The Daily Cheat Sheet. I want to thank everybody again. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you.